Uncensored. Welcome to COASTER-net Uncut.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of COASTER-net Uncut. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk, joined once again by Danny Miller. Danny, now me and you, we've had a little bit of a discussion last week on Lightning Rod, and I think we began to talk about one of the issues of, we even brought it up in the last show, was that, you know what, it's probably not going to win the best new ride. That I think at the beginning of the season, I think a lot of people had Lightning Rod already penciled into best new ride, but it just doesn't seem like that's going to happen. You had some thoughts on maybe why that is. Can you explain to us how the golden tickets work here? And then maybe we can talk about all of our predictions for this year's Golden Ticket Awards. What do you think?
Yeah, so essentially how the golden tickets work, and if you've ever downloaded the golden tickets PDF annually, which is what you and I have done, and that's kind of going to be our guide here for this evening. The golden tickets voting pool is kind of divided into 5 different regions. You have kind of like the Northeast, then you have the Southeast, you have the Midwest, and then you have the West Coast, so to speak. The Northeast kind of being Virginia and up into Maine. The Midwest is kind of like Kentucky, Missouri, Kansas, and northward. That includes Ohio and then goes as far west as the Dakotas. Then you have the Southeast region, which is kind of from Florida over to Texas and then Oklahoma over to North Carolina. And then the West Coast is basically New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and everything west of that, and also Alaska and Hawaii. And then the 5th region is international. And they kind of evenly distribute the votes between those regions. They kind of try and even out those regions. So you do tend to see a little bit of an American bias because it is an American company running the awards. We've talked about that for years and years. So that's kind of how it works. Now the voting always ends. Voting. The ballots are usually due towards the end of June, beginning of July or so. So that's where Lightning Rod became the interesting topic of discussion for Best New Ride, because only a few people got to ride it by then. More people are starting to ride it now. Some people rode it in the middle when it was actually open in tech rehearsals, and then officially for a few days, but then it shut down. And then basically by 4th of July weekend, that's kind of it. Your votes kind of have to be in. So voting has been done for about a month now by the time you guys are watching this, and by the time we're recording this on August 16th, which, by the way, National Roller Coaster Day. Happy National Roller Coaster Day to everybody today. Andy went out and found a credit somewhere in his house today. So that's how the voting works, and I think that's why Lightning Rod became such an interesting discussion last week, specifically talking about Best New Ride, because I had said Fury was the obvious choice last year, and Fury 325 won Best New Ride in 2015. Yep, exactly. Get your Fury shirt on. 325 had 7% of the vote, and in second place was Wicked Cyclone with 14%, and then Twisted Colossus in third with 13%. And you and I suspected that the RMCs would kind of split the RMC fanboy vote, and it would probably be about the same as the B&M fanboy vote, which you got your 27% there. So those ended up being equal. Fury 325 was the obvious choice last year. Lightning Rod should have been the obvious choice this year, and I think after you and I riding it, we both said this is obviously the best new ride of 2016. The problem being, nobody's ridden it. And when I say nobody, I don't mean nobody. I mean very few have ridden. A very low number of people have ridden Lightning Rod. So the question is, did enough golden ticket voters get to ride Lightning Rod? Not only just ride it, period, by now, but to ride it before their ballots were due. And I think that's the problem, because ballots are due so early. And that's why, if you go back a few years, why Flying Turns became eligible for the Best New Ride of 2014, because it officially opened after the voting deadline and even after the awards were announced. And to be fair, you have to allow Flying Turns to have a chance to win a Best New Ride award, and if it opened after the voting period, you have to give it a chance, even though it didn't open in 2014. So that was kind of an awkward situation. The question is, will Lightning Rod, because it did technically officially open, and it has been soft opened. So will Lightning Rod maybe get the same opportunity next year because it's had so many issues? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Because people have ridden it. And I think that's why, even though Lightning Rod is the obvious choice for Best New Ride of 2016, I don't think it's going to win because I don't think enough voters have ridden it yet. I know several voters who have not ridden it yet. And when you look at rides like Storm Chaser, you look at rides like Valravn, even the Justice League rides, those rides are rides that certainly do not belong in the same discussion as Lightning Rod for Best New Ride. Some of them are very average rides. I think Storm Chaser is a good ride at best, but if you look at the list of rides that opened in 2016 and you forget all about how many people have ridden them and everything, Storm Chaser might not even be in the top 5 of 2016 rides. The problem is it opened in April and everyone and their brother has ridden it by this time. Same thing with Valravn at Cedar Point, and we've also got the golden tickets being hosted by Cedar Point this year, which is where Valravn becomes the interesting point of discussion. So it becomes this, did enough people ride the right choice, or is it going to go to the wrong ride simply because of the system?
Well, and I think that's the interesting thing going on here, that I think the rest of this discussion is going to assume that Lightning Rod is out. So that's what we're assuming here, and we're assuming that one of these other coasters are going to take it. And I think it being held...
4 other coasters in my mind that have a shot at winning this. If we're going to, like you said, going to throw Lightning Rod from the discussion, I think there's 5 that should be talked about. There's 4 that I think realistically have a chance.
Well, I think the ones that should be talked about are Valravn, Storm Chaser, maybe Joker, although I'm not sold on Joker because even reports coming from the West Coast are saying it's not as good as Twisted Colossus. I think Monster should be in that discussion at Adventureland.
That's the one that needs to be discussed, but I don't think has a realistic shot because it's in the middle of nowhere and nobody goes to that park.
And I think the Justice League ride, at Great America, it didn't win last year because Fury was the obvious choice, but it's not just coaster. It's Best New Ride. So you can add in the Justice League ride into that discussion if you want to. Was there something else you wanted to add to that that you thought should be in the, or Mako maybe?
So I think Monster deserves to be mentioned because you really enjoyed it, and it looks very much like Cannibal. I've not ridden Monster yet. I rode Cannibal, and Monster and Cannibal seem to be kind of along the same lines. You actually enjoyed Monster more.
Oh, yeah, I did.
So I think that would definitely put Monster in the discussion. I think it should. The problem is being out there in Iowa, not a big corporate park. Very rarely do we see small park rides win these type of awards because people just don't get there in the first year that they're open. They, usually take some time to plan a trip around it. So Monster, I think, is one that deserves to be considered, but at the end of the day, I think falls into the trap of not being at a big park and not having enough riders.
Well, I don't even think you can say that because we do have examples of small parks winning rides. Or winning stuff like that. Like you look at Flying Turns. Flying Turns 1, that's at a small, but it's an East Coast park, so I think that gives it the advantage because.
But to be fair, Knoebels has always been a favorite of the Golden Ticket Awards.
Absolutely,
Adventureland has not been.
Absolutely. Prowler won in 2009, which I think shocked a lot of people when it beat Diamondback.
Yeah, that's one of the big ones.
That's probably the most notable upset win. And I might agree with that decision too. I do agree with you that I don't think Monster's going to be in the discussion simply because of its location, but I do think it does have a shot because a number of clubs went out to Adventureland this year, notably The European Coaster Club went out to Adventureland. I know our friend Jim Winslet went out there and rode it. But did they feel that it was the best new coaster? I don't know. That I think we have a number of different people going.
I don't think too many. I don't think enough of them did.
Yeah. So then what were the other four that you had?
So I would say maybe 4.5. I keep forgetting about Joker, right? Because Joker just seemed to fly under the radar this year. I know several people who really enjoyed Joker and said it should be considered just because of the lack of really high-profile rides that have come out. I know a couple of people that said if you put Spacer, Valravn, and Joker in a discussion, those three, Joker might be the best of the three of them. So maybe that's something to consider. But I think the ones that we have to talk about, if we're going to pick 5 rides to talk about, I think Joker has to be in that discussion. Just because, people go wild for the RMCs. And even though it isn't a Northern California park, a lot of people have gotten to ride it. It has had some downtime, though. But out there, people are going to ride it quickly. Storm Chaser, like I said, everyone has ridden it, even though it might be the weakest of the 5 rides that I'm going to mention here. I think it deserves to be discussed simply because it opened in mid-April and everyone has ridden it, pretty much. Anyone who wants to ride Storm Chaser has ridden it by now.
Yeah.
Anything that opens at Cedar Point has to be considered. So Valravn has to be considered very, very strongly, especially with the awards being hosted by Cedar Point. You would think that might help it some. I think Mako deserves to be in the discussion because you've got a lot of voters down in Florida, and you know that they all ride it right away. That's a very heavily populated area of coaster enthusiasts, so you know that even though it opened at the beginning of June, Mako, historically, the B&M Hypers have been favorites of the golden ticket voters. So I think there's a good opportunity for Mako to maybe come in and steal the show. And the other one, which I don't think is going to win, but I think deserves to be mentioned, kind of along the same lines of Monster, is Cobra's Curse, simply for its uniqueness and its thematic elements and the fact that it is such a different style ride from what we're used to. Historically, those types of rides haven't usually won Best New Ride, but I think it deserves to be discussed in the same sort of idea, along the same lines of Monster, and why Monster deserves to be discussed. But I think really you're looking at it, it's down between Storm Chaser, Valravn, and maybe Mako, maybe Joker, but I think Storm Chaser, Valravn, and Mako are the real 3 that are the legitimate choices that might end up winning it, realistically.
And here's what. So I think we're moving into the area of that I fear, because I fear what's going to happen in this vote. That I fear that Storm Chaser is going to run away with this voting. And people are in love with Storm Chaser, and I don't understand it, because you have a $22 million dive coaster built at Cedar Point that's clearly a better ride than Storm Chaser. Clearly a better ride than Storm Chaser. But people say, well, it's like the other ones. Well, explain to me how Storm Chaser isn't like every other RMC. Because in my mind, Storm Chaser is just a mix of Medusa and Wicked Cyclone. They just took different elements and put them together. So how is that any more unique than what Valravn did with a dive coaster? Valravn did brand new maneuvers on a dive coaster, so it's not like they cloned Griffin or cloned Shikra or cloned one of the European, coasters. They built a custom coaster that's completely new and completely unique, and yet we have people saying, oh, it's just another dive coaster. How is Storm Chaser not just another RMC? Oh, because it's the first one you've been on? Is that why it's unique? It's the first one you've been on, so that makes it special. I'm sorry, Danny Miller. If you don't get out very much and that's your first RMC, that doesn't make it the best. I'm sorry. I'm just going to lay that out there to all those people out there.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the other thing that bothered me, and some people are going to come at me for this one, but I remember when we were seeing construction photos and videos of Mako down at SeaWorld, everyone's like, well, that ride doesn't look exciting. It looks like it just has a bunch of airtime hills. What do you say? thing. When did we come? Okay, so you guys are talking about how Storm Chaser has amazing ejector airtime, yet when B&M builds a coaster that's 3 times as high and 3 times as fast and still has really good airtime, you're gonna bitch about it. I don't understand it. I don't understand it.
I don't get it.
And again, same argument. Well, it looks like all the other stuff they've done. Okay, Storm Chaser is the drop of Medusa, the airtime hill of Twisted Colossus or whatever, the crossover friggin' turn of Outlaw Run, the little 0G stall roll of Wicked Cyclone, and the little cheap ending of Wicked Cyclone and Lightning Run, which is across the park. Like...
I don't get it. Out of all the new rides I've ridden this year, I've been on Valravn, I've been on Monster, I've been on Justice League. I'm gonna get on Mako and Cobra's Curse by the end of the year. Storm Chaser by far was the least interesting to me at all. And I went in thinking, well, maybe this is something. I still think it's slow. I thought it was slow the day I rode it. I thought it was slow the day that they posted videos of it. And I got people, texting me now saying, oh, but they've changed stuff. It's running a lot better now. But wait a minute, when it would open, people talked about the insane airtime. So was it insane airtime back in May, or is it insane airtime now, or do you not know what insane airtime is? Because I think we've begun to throw around terms like insane a lot too easily, that when you actually have insane airtime, like Lightning Rod, I challenge anyone to go ride Lightning Rod and tell me that airtime is on the same level of Storm Chaser. Go, and you will be the fool in that scenario. Trust me.
I mean, again, great, excellent point. Thing. Anyone who goes to ride Storm Chaser and says that it has amazing ejector airtime has not ridden one Lightning Rod. We know that for a fact. And probably has not ridden a whole lot of other RMCs, if any, because the other RMCs all probably have better airtime than Storm Chaser. That's my personal opinion. Even the ones that's big a fan of, like Twisted Colossus is lower on the list of the RMCs for me. Goliath does airtime better than Storm Chaser. And I think, you would even say, correct me if I'm wrong, you would even say Wicked Cyclone does airtime better than Storm Chaser. Would you not?
Storm Chaser makes Wicked Cyclone look like a top 5 ride, a legitimate top 5 ride. like if you only had those two in your book. I'm sorry to rip on people here, but I think people are way too in love with a lot of what RMC is doing, and they're falling in love with these elements, and it's just not there. Come on, that drop on Valravn, that first drop is better, and I know you haven't been on it yet, is better than all of Storm Chaser combined. Like, come on. Like this, we're getting absolutely silly here that people complain about Cedar Point fanboys, but now we have the opposite reaction where we're getting all of these other fanboys coming out. Where we have Kings Island fanboys and Kentucky Kingdom fanboys. Or the Kentucky Kingdom fanboys are the ones that are fed up with Kings Island. It's getting disgusting at this point that just because you got an axe to grind with a major corporate park doesn't mean that the coasters at this other park are any better. It does not mean that. They can be good, they can be fun to ride, but it doesn't mean that they're the best new ride. So anyone looking at this list, the obvious answer to me is probably Valravn is the winner. If we were going to be legitimate about it.
And you know what? To make another point, I think you and I represent that sentiment perfectly, because we did not, for about 10 minutes last week, all we did was bitch and moan about how Lightning Rod didn't open, and we still both loved it. So just because you have an axe to grind, like you said, and just because you have a bone to pick with a park, doesn't mean they can't put in a good ride. And, boring and mild this, boring it. Stop it. Stop it. You're making me sick. Stop it.
And people can complain about, and I could give two shits about Kentucky Kingdom, Like, honestly, I have no feeling towards them whatsoever. I could care less, about anything. I'm going to judge their coasters based against other coasters that I've already ridden. And I'm of the opinion that their coasters don't stand up anywhere to any of the big corporate parks. That they're just not there. Now, if you want to love them and you want to say that they're great, fine, so be it. But know that you're doing that because you got an agenda, and that's what you want to do. I don't have an agenda. I don't need to put extra tickets into Kentucky Kingdom's pocket. They ain't paying me. I have no reason to support them. I have no reason to support any park because no park is paying me money. So, if I was to look at this, the best rides that I felt I had this year were on Justice League, Valravn, and Monster. If I was to say, in my opinion, what ride probably would win in that group, it would probably go Monster, Justice League, Valravn. If I was to go on an objective look at things, I would say Valravn is probably the clear winner.
Sure.
So.
Sure. I mean, and again, I think, again, you said this a few minutes ago, I think this is going where we fear. And the fact that people like to complain about the B&Ms and that they're too similar, and the fact that people are in love with this Storm Chaser ride and that it opens so early, I fear that even though you and I think that Storm Chaser may not even be deserving of a top 5 spot, historically they've listed, in the PDF here, they've listed the top 5. Last year we had Fury 325, Wicked Cyclone, Twisted Colossus, Choo Choo Lane, and then Thunderbird at Holiday World.
I haven't even talked about international rides, because you throw international rides into this, and it blows it all up. You got things like
what about rides like
Tyrone?
Wildfire or Tyrone? Yeah.
Like, seriously, it blows up this whole discussion if you start talking about
Shanghai Disney, like the Tron Light Cycle roller coaster, stuff like that. I mean, we might see stuff like that. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if we will see it. Usually you see at least one international ride somewhere on there. And I think Tyrone might have been the pick, but I think it opened up too late because it opened up in the middle of June. Wildfire, I don't know.
So many things opened up in June this year.
I know. Like I even Mako opened up June 1st. How many riders did it get? In the month of June, so I don't know how that's going to go, but
do you have an official prediction?
Well, as my final thought, I also want to say this, that the golden tickets, if you want to be legitimate, and many people say they are not legitimate, fine, whatever. But I feel that if Storm Chaser wins this award, that it's because the golden tickets are now being used not for generating advertising money, but rather to advertise and spotlight certain parks, that people want to put a spotlight on Kentucky Kingdom and say, oh, look at the great things that they're doing. And let me say, they are doing great things. From having nothing there a few years ago to being completely closed to opening and having a very nice water park, having rides running, having roller coasters that are fun to ride. That's a great achievement. That should be spotlighted. But you don't have to do it with the Golden Ticket Award for giving the best new ride to Storm Chaser. That's not the way to do it.
Give them a publisher's pick.
Exactly. It's not, this pick is not there to say, hey, which park do I want to spotlight and show, hey, look at the great things they're doing. My official pick is I think it's going to be Valravn. And I to transition into the next segment, I think it's going to be Valravn because I think Cedar Point's going to be a little bit short in other areas. So, I
think that's a good point. And between Valravn and Cedar, they've both been open a lot longer than Mako. And I think the argument for Valravn is the fact that the awards are at Cedar Point, and Gatekeeper didn't win. A few years back, as Outlaw Run and Iron Rattler were just so far ahead. Gatekeeper came in a distant third that year. Outlaw Run 45%, Iron Rattler 19%, Gatekeeper came in third at 15%. So I think it's probably a pretty safe bet. I would say it's pretty much 50-50 between Valravn or Storm Chaser. I think because a lot of the golden ticket voters are ace people, and Ace does tend to skew older, and some of the older folks do not like the restraints of the RMCs. I think you're going to see Valravn win it. However, I am going to say this. I would not be if I was putting money on it, I might actually put the money on Storm Chaser to win it. And here's what's going to be the hilarious thing. All those people for years who have buried Amusement Today and have buried the golden tickets are all of a sudden going to praise them when Storm Chaser wins Rescue Ride, and I will immediately go after those people and tell them, but wait a minute, you've been bitching about these awards for the last 5 years. All of a sudden they do something you agree with and you like them all of a sudden. That's bullshit.
Yeah. Okay, let's move off of this because it's
over.
Yeah, you're raising my blood pressure, Danny Miller, and we need to move on. Let's at this point let's look at some of the other little awards. The thing is, I don't think a lot of these awards are going to change. Do you? In general, I don't think we're going to see a lot of movement.
Well, and here's the thing. This has been, this is one of the biggest problems that people seem to have with the Golden Ticket Awards. But the Golden Tickets themselves actually have on their FAQ page, there is a question that says, how come the same rides in the same parks seem to win your awards every year? And the answer says, well, a park that has really good food is not very likely to just stop making good food. And a park with good shows isn't just going to stop having good shows. If you look historically, I've got PDFs up from several previous years. If you do look, 5, 6, 7, 8 years in the past, some of these awards have changed over the years, and you can see, like, Best Park is one of them. Cedar Point always won. But if you look at the last 5 years, Europa Park in Germany was down, like, in the 5 to 10 mark and has slowly climbed its way up. And 3 years ago was 1 percentage point behind Cedar Point. The following year beat it by quite a good number. I want to say it was like 6% or something. And then last year won by 10%. So you do start to see over time, you see the gradual change that eventually leads to a new winner. 10% difference last year, Europa Park 24%, Cedar Point 14%. I don't think that's going to change even with Cedar Point hosting. I don't see them see them flipping 10% somewhere there. The one thing I will say about this award is Dollywood currently 4th as of last year at 9%. I would not be surprised if people get frustrated enough with Dollywood that they actually go down a spot or two, maybe underneath a Disneyland who had 7%. I wouldn't be surprised to see Disneyland, especially with everything they did with the Diamond Celebration, and they did a lot of special things the last year or two. I could really see maybe Disneyland hopping up into that 4th spot and passing Dollywood.
Well, and you mentioned Cedar Point. I also do not see Cedar Point retaking the crown, but I think this is a discussion to revisit as we move closer to 2020. And the knock on Cedar Point has always been it doesn't have that signature wood coaster that you can really point to that people love. Now that they're removing Mean Streak, it kind of opens up a lot of different avenues for how they're going to proceed forward. And you got to think that somewhere in the next 3 seasons, we're going to see a brand new wood coaster be put into the park if they're taking out Mean Streak. So maybe that changes by 2020. Maybe they make a resurgence.
I think there's a chance, and I think the thing to watch is we know that there was a 10% gap, which is bigger than the previous year. It'll be interesting to see that with the addition of Valravn, does Cedar Point close the gap a little bit? Because if Cedar Point does close that gap to under 10% again, I think maybe we'll start to see it work towards that. But we will see, because Europa Park for years, people said it was the perfect park, but it didn't have a wood coaster. They added Vodon, and all of a sudden, 3 years later, 2 years after they built Vodon, a lot of people said, is the nearly perfect park, now perfect. That's what they always said about Europa Park. And if Cedar Point starts to move towards that signature wood coaster and really rounding out that collection, does that maybe push them back into the discussion? I think that's a very good point that you make there.
Yeah.
So do you want to go through some of these other awards
let's
real quickly?
go through.
And just stop me when you hear one. There's one specifically that I think there's two specifically that I think will change, and I will leave those for the end. But stop me if you hear me say one that you think might change. Best water park, Dollywood Splash Country was 6% in third, Splash and Safari second, 19%, Schlitterbahn 52%. Even I don't see that changing. Schlitterbahn's always. I mean, this is the Texas one. Remember?
Yeah, this is the Texas one, but not Dollywood. Holiday World. They've been kind of focusing on the dry side of the park. I think if they did one more big water park expansion, that they got to be jumping up, because that's a great water park. And I've never been to Schlitterbahn.
One of the very few water parks that I'll go
to. But I think that's skewed way off base. I think Splash and Safari should be more in that discussion. So, but continue.
I think so too. I don't see it changing, but I think eventually it should. Best Marine Life Park, SeaWorld Orlando 55% has been the perennial favorite there. SeaWorld San Diego 10%, Discovery Cove 9%, SeaWorld San Antonio 8%, and Discovery Kingdom down there is 7%. I don't see that one changing because it's really kind of what's the best SeaWorld with Discovery Kingdom kind of thrown in there.
Yeah.
Let's see, best indoor water park, Schlitterbahn Galveston Island in Texas, 28%.
I have no idea.
A couple of Kalahari's are behind that. I don't see that changing.
Yeah.
Best kids area, Kings Island at 27%. Second place was Efteling in the Netherlands at 10%, so I don't see that changing.
Yeah, that's not going to move.
Cleanest park, Holiday World 25%, Dollywood 14%, Busch Gardens Williamsburg 11%, then Europa at 9%, Disneyland 8%. Maybe see some shuffling of the lower ones there, but Holiday World I think is going to have that one. So I don't think they've ever lost that one. At least I think 16 years in a row they've won that one now. So that's one. Best shows, Dollywood 42%, Six Flags Fiesta Texas 11%, Silver Dollar City 8%. Don't see that one changing either. Just too big of a gap on some of these for 1 year.
And even though I think Dollywood shows, if you take just their summer shows were not, like, nothing really even enticed me to go see something. But their Festival of Nations, you throw that in there, you throw in some of their Christmas shows, and it goes far. The Festival of Nations shows were far and above some of the best shows I've ever seen at a theme park. So, I don't think that changes.
No, I don't think so. Here's an interesting one for you. And I think this one deserves a lot of discussion. Maybe not a lot of discussion. But I think it deserves to be mentioned. Best Seaside Park. And I'll tell you why I think this one's interesting. Here's the tally from last year. Maury's Piers won for the very first time at 27%. Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk came in second at 26.5%. And Blackpool Pleasure Beach was third at 26%. So 3 parks all within 1 percentage point. That's 2015. In 2014, Maury's, who won last year at 27%, was fourth and only had 12% of the vote, gained 15 percentage points. And the note there is they co-hosted CoasterCon with Six Flags Great Adventure in 2015. And Maury's got a huge bump in voters last year. Santa Cruz won in 2014 with 45%, and Blackpool was second. So both Blackpool and Maury's stole a lot of votes from Santa Cruz. So there's 2 questions that be discussed here. Does Maury's not hosting an event this year hurt them and bump them back down? And then does Blackpool, with some more overseas trips, does Blackpool maybe gain some? Do we see Blackpool win the award? Do we maybe see Santa Cruz jump back in there? I think you might see Santa Cruz jump back in to that number 1 spot there. I think Blackpool will follow it, and I think Maury's might actually drop down to third again.
It's very possible. I can't speak to much of that because I haven't been to any of them. So You know, I wouldn't be.
I've been to Santa Cruz and Maury's. I preferred Santa Cruz to Maury's.
I wouldn't be surprised though, because I've always heard really good things about Blackpool, so I would not be surprised at all.
So we'll go through some of the other ones here before I get to another one that I think deserves a little bit of discussion. Best food is always a highly debated one. So last year it was Knoebels at 23%, Dollywood at 20% in second, and then Epcot at 16%. Those are the big ones there. If we look at best food from the previous years, Dollywood won in 2014 over Knoebels at 21-18. And then in 2013, they actually had a very famous tie. They both had 24%. So we've had Dollywood and Knoebels, and then if we look at 2012 with the food, let's see, where's the food from 2012 on this list here? Dollywood won in 2012, so we had Dollywood, then we had a tie, then we had Dollywood, and then we had Knoebels win last year again. So again, does Dollywood maybe take a little bit of a hit because people are frustrated with the park, or does the amount of people who went to Dollywood this year make people vote for Dollywood? I would vote for Dollywood above Knoebels in the food department.
I would vote for Dollywood above Knoebels, but I just think Epcot and Silver Dollar City, the two right behind it, are both better than the top two. I think so. Out of the group, I think Silver Dollar City is the best, and then I think following that is Epcot. So I wouldn't be surprised, but you know, in the golden tickets, there's a notorious anti-Disney theme throughout the whole thing. You know, outside of a very few awards. You know, but I don't know. I can't speak because I'm not overly impressed by what Knoebels offers, and I'm not overly impressed by what Dollywood offers, because I think Silver Dollar City has all the same stuff but does it better in every category.
Sure. Let's see. Here's a couple more for you. Best water park ride: Wildebeest at 25%, Mammoth at 18%. I think Wildebeest is still going to win that. I think Wildebeest is the best water park ride of the few I've been on. Best indoor coaster: Revenge of the Mummy 23%, Space Mountain 12%. Don't see that changing. I think Revenge of the Mummy is quite a fine choice there as well. Best dark ride: Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey 13%, followed closely by the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror at Disney's Hollywood Studios at 12%. Harry Potter and the Escape from Gringotts at 9%, and The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man 8.5%. Very tight discussion there.
Well,
I prefer Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. I wonder if maybe Tower of Terror won't start to take this back at some point. So close.
The problem is we know that the Tower of Terror in California is getting the Guardians of the Galaxy overlay. Will they eventually move that? They can't really move that to Orlando because of the deal with Universal. So we kind of know that's always going to be Tower of Terror. But I think here's the better question. Does Harry Potter opening at Universal Hollywood have an impact here? Because they've upgraded to the 3D glasses, supposedly have done all those scenes a lot better.
What I think's going to happen.
So if you think that the Forbidden Journey is good at Islands of Adventure, and it seems every report saying that the one at Hollywood is that much better, wouldn't it stand to reason that the Hollywood one jumps to first? I don't know. Maybe it does. The question is, have enough people ridden it? You know, that becomes the big question.
I don't know if the answer to that is yes, but I think maybe it does start to shift the voting a little bit. I think it does start to shake up these rankings, because not so long ago, Spider-Man was number 1, and it's now down to number 4 thanks to Forbidden Journey and Gringotts, which both currently rank ahead of it slightly. So, best outdoor show production: Illuminations at Epcot, ahead of World of Color, which the new World of Color show is not good. Old one was fantastic. So I think Illuminations is probably there, if anything, and stretch the lead a little bit. Best landscaping: Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, 9%. Gilroy Gardens, 17%. Gilroy Gardens, I think, really deserves that second place spot. I will still pick Busch Gardens. We've talked about that not so long ago in this show. Don't see that changing. Best Halloween event, Universal Orlando Resort with Halloween Horror Nights, 28%. Knott's Berry Farm and Knott's Scary Farm at 18%. Ever going to take that award from Universal?
Well, no, but this lineup here is a joke. The fact that Knoebels and Kennywood are both on this just show you the East Coast bias in the Golden Ticket Awards, because there is in no world in this one or the next does Knoebels or Kennywood top some of the haunt events that we have. It has Busch Gardens Tampa. The other two Howl-O-Screams are just as good. Nowhere does it say Universal Hollywood, which is by far better than probably the bottom three there. Also not noted is Six Flags Magic Mountain, who, even though people generally hate the Fright Fest events, Magic Mountains is actually the standout. That a lot of people like that one. So Orlando, yes, they got the winner right, but the bottom of this list needs to be fixed, because this is shameful. This is shameful that Knoebels, that doesn't even have a single haunted house in their event, is even listed on this. It's shameful, and it shows you the East Coast bias in the Golden Tickets. And let's not forget that at any point of this, Mr. East Coaster.
Yes, that's right. Go Knoebels. Wearing the Knoebels shirt.
And I'm not. Kennywood doesn't belong there
best
either.
Christmas event. Oh.
Kennywood doesn't belong there either.
I've never been to the Kennywood one. So.
I've never even heard anything about no one even talks about the Kennywood event. So how it garners.
See, I have. I've heard tons of people talk about Phantom Fright Nights. They were the very first park to do the scares everywhere and not have scare zones and just have scare actors around the entire park. They were the first ones to do that.
I'm involved in a lot of different haunt circles, and people don't talk about that at all. So it's roller coaster people obviously voting on this and not haunt people, which is a shame, because you shouldn't have, if you don't have the correct voters, you shouldn't have an award for it. I'm sorry.
So, best Christmas event, Dollywood 40%, Disneyland 10%, second place. We hear so many things. We might actually get to sample that this year, right? So we might get a chance to try out Smoky Mountain Christmas this year. Best Carousel, Knoebels 42%, Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk 23%, and then you have Six Flags Great America 6% with the Carousel Columbia there. So I think that's an okay list. Don't see that changing either with the big gaps there. Friendliest Park, Dollywood 35%, Holiday World 18%. I don't necessarily disagree with that. However, I do think Holiday World does deserve to be at least a little closer there. I would probably go for Holiday World over Dollywood if I had to choose. I'm surprised that gap is as big as it is. Best Funhouse / walkthrough attraction, the Noah's Ark at Kennywood has always gotten high reviews. That is 27%. The Ghost Ship at Maurice Piers, 23%, which is also a very fine attraction. I think the refurbishment of the Kennywood Noah's Ark, though, is possibly going to help it stretch out that lead a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's some food for thought there. Now, there's one other one. Let's see here. I think I got all of them except for the one which I think deserves... there's two that I missed, one of which I want to talk about. Best water park ride in an amusement park, not in a water park. Or best water ride in a park, not best water park ride, excuse me. And the reason I wanted to list this one off is because of one of the rides on here. First of all, in the fifth spot, Timber Mountain Log Ride, I think that needs to be much, much higher. At 6%.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic ride, especially with the refurbishment. That needs to be up there. The winner has been Valhalla at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, 28%. Dudley Do Right with 19%. And second, Splash Mountain in fourth at 9%. And Andy's favorite comes in at number 4 with 7% of the vote. The Mountain Slidewinder at Dollywood. What are your thoughts on that? You rode that for the first time when we went down to that park 2 weeks ago.
I'll say this. It's a unique ride. Does it belong on a list like this with as many good water rides?
It's a water ride in an amusement park.
Well, no,
I don't think it belongs on that. I don't think it belongs in the company of those rides.
Exactly. It's a nice ride. Nowhere in the history of man does it belong being discussed amongst the greats. There's,
I thought you would enjoy that.
I would even say that the former Shoot the Rapids might have been a better water ride inside a park than Mountain Sidewinder. Like, come on.
Okay, so here's the other one that I think. Unfortunately, speaking of death traps. The Best Children's Park Award, I think, is one that might be up for some debate this year, because the traditional winner has always been Idlewild and Soak Zone in Pennsylvania, which had 21% last year, and Storybook Land in New Jersey had 20% last year. And then Storyland, not Storybook Land, Storyland in New Hampshire had 9%. I don't think Idlewild falls lower than 2, but do you think the incident recently hurts it a little bit? Well, the thing is, the voting was already done. So
the voting's already done.
Do you think Storybook Land maybe hops it, or do you think maybe we don't see the effects of that till next year? Do we see effects of that at all? I don't know.
Here's the thing. Idlewild's a nice place, but I didn't think there was anything there that was overwhelmingly nice. Having been to places like Quasi, I thought had just as much as they do. The Legoland parks. The problem is I think the Legoland split the vote because we see Windsor, California, and Florida all on here. Yeah. Idlewild's a nice park. I think it's that small park bias again, the non-corporate. But maybe one of your Storybook Lands, and which one? The one in New Hampshire is the one with Rorosaurus, right? So you would think that one. I really enjoyed that park. We had a great time. Went to that park for the first time this year. Really enjoyed it. A great kids park, for sure. Yeah. I really think that should probably be a little higher. Yeah, I think we're going to see some movement there. Yeah, I think we could. If not this year, then I think next year maybe we'll start to see some of that. So I guess that's pretty much all the Ride and Park Awards. So I guess to wrap up the discussion this evening, we have to talk about the roller coasters, right? Because, I think that's where it gets interesting. Here, and let's talk about the wood first, because I think the bigger discussion is going to be steel, I think. Not because we had any new out of this world amazing new steel rides, but because of one in particular that opened up last year that we think has a shot to make a big move. So let's talk about the wood coasters first. I'll read off the top 10 here from last year. Boulder Dash number 1 at $16.25. El Toro number 2 at $14.64. Phoenix number 3, $13.01. Voyage number 4 at $11.84. Thunderhead had $9.04 at number 5. The Beast, Andy's favorite, at number 6, $7.40. Ravine Flyer 2, $7.22, came in 7th. 8 was Outlaw Run with $6.37. Gold Striker had 560 points at number 9. And a surprising number 10, I think, is still Lightning Racer with 421 points. Rides that are below it that I would put higher, the Raven, the Holiday World, which came in at 12. Goliath at Great America, number 14. The Prowler is all the way down there at 17. Yeah. Shivering Timbers down there at number 20. Legend at Holiday World. Legend is interesting because it was number 25. Well, do you think Legend moves up this year? Absolutely.
I think Legend moves up.
Because let's
look, Rampage, number 28, with a full season.
Well, let's look at what's happening here. I'm not so sold on Rampage, but look at what happens. Anything that's really super intense, like the Voyage is ranked down, Outlaw Run is ranked down, the Legend, which was ultra intense, is ranked down. So yes, I think the Legend's going to start moving back up because the back half is less intense and has more, airtime in it. Even if Lightning Rod was to be placed onto this list this year, and let's say that a full complement of people wrote it, I still don't think it does that well. because I don't think this list here reflects a population that values a truly intense roller coaster. You look at like El Toro. El Toro is intense, those drops, but it's not. You can re-ride El Toro a lot. Voyage is tough to re-ride. Outlaw Run is tough to re-ride. I don't know. And we said that Lightning Rod is so intense. I don't know how Lightning Rod would have done here. The question is does Boulder Dash keep that top spot again? I don't know. You're the wood coaster guy. You tell me.
Well, I think there's 3 rides in particular to watch. I think you have to watch Legend because of what happened to it. I think Legend will move up.
But it's not gonna move up to 1 though. It's gonna move up, but it's not gonna move up to 1. Yeah.
Oh, no. I think Legend is going to move up. I think you've got to watch Choo Choo Lane as well, because Choo Choo Lane debuted at number 19, which was very, very surprising. And given it another year, I don't know how many more people went to go up, but I think you could compare Choo Choo Lane last year to Lightning Rod of the number of golden ticket voters that actually got to ride it, because you would think it's very few, but those who rode it probably put it fairly high. So I would say Lightning Rod probably comes in somewhere between like 16 and 20, just because so few people rode it. Maybe it's even lower than that. I do think it lands somewhere on this list. Where exactly is anyone's guess, but I think if it did have a full season under its belt, I think you might see it in the top 10. I don't know, you might, but I think Legend is one to watch on the to go on the rise. I think Gold Striker is another one to watch because that's one that has consistently moved up as more people have ridden it, and I think the other one to watch is Boulder Dash, just because I think it's very possible. It had a good lead, but I do think that it's possible that maybe we see Boulder Dash fall out. If I had to make a prediction, I would say no. I would say probably the top 5 probably stay where they are. Boulder Dash, El Toro, Phoenix, Voyage, Thunderhead. You and I are both in agreement that Voyage absolutely should be number 1 on this list, and there's not really a contest with it. I think maybe moves up from 17 because a lot of enthusiast events were out there this year. The European Club went there. So I would say keep an eye on Prowler, keep an eye on Legend, keep an eye on Choo Choo Lane. I think are the 3 that have the possibility to all move up this year.
Yeah.
And Rampage with a
Rampage will
season.
move up
Rampage
too.
Down there, number 28. I think that'll probably move up a little bit. Just trying to see if there's any other, wood coasters that might move up. We've heard that there's been a retract on the Boardwalk Bullet, which is sitting there at 43. Maybe that one moves up a little bit, but generally speaking, I think that's kind of what you're looking at for this list. So shall we now go to the big boys and talk about the Steelies?
Well, there's so much to talk about here, and particularly you talked about a few rides on the wood side, and I'm going to talk about a few rides on the steel side. And particularly, I think you have to look at, if you look at the top 10 here, you had Millennium Force at 1 with 1205, Bizarro at 2 at 929, Expedition G-Force at 3 with 714, 4 was Fury with 671, 5 was Nitro at 650, insert laugh track, 6 was Apollo's Chariot at 597, 7 was Intimidator at Carowinds at 499, 8 was Leviathan with 491, 9 was Nemesis with 462, and 10 was New Texas Giant at 450. Wow, that is quite the list there. That is quite the list. Anyway, I think the 2 that really stand out to me on this list is I don't think we'll see a lot of movement on this one. Maverick might move up. Maverick was at 22. All those people out there that bitched and moaned about the restraints on Maverick, that's been rectified for you people.
You got your wish.
You got your wish. It's now more comfortable. So you should be ranking it up, hopefully, on those ballots that you filled out. We'll see if that actually happens, though. I'm a little skeptical because I think it's just people crying that it's too intense, and they use the restraints as a scapegoat.
If I can interrupt, let's take a look at number 43.
43.
On the
Oh,
list.
Jesus.
Number 43 on the steal list, and we'll also take notice of one that is oddly absent from the list. Some green roller coaster there at Cedar Point, which is oddly absent.
Wicked Twister?
Number 43, we've got Manta. Let's see where
I thought you meant Wicked Twister, because that's oddly absent as well.
No, I said a green roller coaster.
It's green. It's green supports. It's green supports.
No, it's teal. Those are teal.
Whatever. There's seafoam green. Like, come on. Anyway, so the two I think we
need to bring it to the lowest common denominator.
The two I think we have to look at are Bizarro and Fury 325. Bizarro, interesting case because they've moved it back. They took off the audio. They've moved it back to Superman. However, they did not change the restraints on it, so they still do not have the Millennium Force intimate restraints and we know that enthusiasts love restraints. That when you talk about wood coasters, they always talk about, buzz bars are so much better, and when you talk about steel coasters, it's the intimate restraints on dragster are so much better than the ones on King Ka. That it's all about freedom. So yeah, you still have Bizarro minus the audio equipment, but I've not heard a lot of people raving about Bizarro. Plus, on top of all of that, you have the VR being placed on Bizarro, and if there's anything that enthusiasts hate more than restraints, it's VR apparently, and and long wait times and dispatch times. So I don't see Bizarro. I don't see Bizarro moving up there. I just don't. I see no reason why Expedition G-Force moves up. Nothing has really happened to that coaster. The people who have ridden it have been out there already. All the big ACE events have occurred. However, I do think Fury placing at number 4 in its first year, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is the year that Fury 325 beats Millennium Force. The long-standing best steel coaster on the planet, Millennium Force, I think it's going to go down to Fury this year. And I think Cedar Point's going to be hosting the event and handing off the award to Fury, in my opinion. What do you think?
I think there's too many Millennium Force fan nuts out there to take it away because, again, we've heard that people, you said it, people tend to not like intense roller coasters.
Yeah.
You see rides like Wicked Cyclone, you see rides like Iron Rattler, you see rides like Banshee, you see rides like X2, Intimidator 305, Magnum, not even in the top 10 of these lists.
But Nitro is up there.
But Nitro is at number
5. At 5.
So here's what I think. If you look at the numbers, Fury 325 at 671, Expedition G-Force at 714. Just by getting new riders, Fury is going to gain points.
Yeah.
Because the distinction to make here is in order for a ride to get beaten and to move down, it has to actually move out of people's top 10. Because the way the voting is, you have a list of a top 10. And, your number 1 coaster gets 10 points, your number 10 coaster gets 1 point, and that's how they do it. And they form the top 50 list. So in order for a coaster has to move down your list in order to lose points. So the only way it's not like ours, where it shifts, based on a percentage. It's not a percentage. It's simply a points total. So Fury, just simply by gaining riders and placing in people's top 10, will start to gain points. And I think it will pass Expedition G-Force simply because it's already so close to it. I think the changes to Bizarro might make some people, move it down, maybe not, but I think Fury may gain enough riders that Fury may go up to number 2. I think the gap between Fury and Millennium Force is still too great to overcome. And the fact that it's at Cedar Point, I think it's at least one more year until Fury takes number 1. I think Fury moves up to number 2. I'm not saying it's right, because I think Fury is the best steel coaster on this list. I don't think it'll make up the entire gap, though. I think Millennium Force still wins. I think Fury's number 2.
But my thinking is this. So Fury places number 4 in a year where votes are, supposedly due by June 30th, and it gained that many votes in that amount of time. How many more people have gone down there to ride Fury from July 1st up until June 30th of this year?
I fear that so many people went down to ride it early last year, is my fear. So many people rode that ride early on.
I'm not going to say that a lot of people didn't. Yeah, I'm not going to say that a lot of people didn't. I'm just saying that the added number of people, and then if you move up that much, what would then cause Fury to finally overtake Millennium Force? Because those people who have to, like you said, they have to move it down. I think that if Fury doesn't overtake Millennium this year, it ain't never going to happen. People predicted for how long? I
think it depends on how close it gets.
Well, how long did people say, oh yeah, Leviathan is going to take over Millennium Force, Leviathan this, Leviathan that? And it never happened. Leviathan's not even, represented. It's just, it's that movement forward.
But look at Bizarro. Look at Bizarro and look at Millennium Force. Bizarro won this award for 3 or 4 straight years, and now look at the gap. Things can change. I think there's enough people. If Fury gets within 100 points. If Fury gets within 100 points this year, I think it's absolutely possible that next year we see it overtake it, because I think the thing is, even if let's say people have Millennium Force number 1, even if Fury becomes number 1 and Millennium Force loses down to number 2, Fury gains those points, but Millennium Force only loses a point. And it's not like our percentage system where it shifts and where it's affected much more when you start to add in other rides and you start to take away from the other rides. This is a strict total. So yeah, I think maybe Millennium Force comes down a little bit to like 1180 or something, and Fury maybe ends up around the 1050, 1100 mark maybe.
But if I'm submitting let's take it from the voter perspective. If I'm submitting my ballot, and my ballot is Millennium Force, 1, and then it goes down. And then I put Fury, and I move Fury in, and I say, well, Fury's now number 1, Millennium Force is now number 2. Going forward, what would make me change that? Like the thing with Bizarro this year, and it changing coaster types and putting VR on it, that's going to piss a whole lot of people off. People might actually take Bizarro and rank that down further. Now, and that's assuming that it's only going to go down 1 point. That's assuming that you had Millennium Force as number 1 before and didn't have it much lower, and Fury skipping a whole bunch of coasters and getting a whole bunch of points. I don't know. I just feel that if Fury doesn't, if it's within 100.
In any case, if Millennium Force is number 9 and you make Fury number 1, Millennium Force still only loses 1 point by being bumped down.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Is my point. This is a real tough call here because I'm rethinking the math. 671. This ride opened at the end of March, so we had a little bit of March, April, May, June. So we had 3 months for people to go ride it. 671.
Well, there's no way that the majority.
The question becomes: Does Fury's number double? If Fury's number doubles, it barely beats Millennium Force. Does it double?
I think it does. I think the number of people.
I don't think it does.
I think the number of people that rode it from July 1st to June 30th of this year, you're assuming that every single voter got down to Carowinds. And you're telling me, and of the voting pool, how many of them did not get to Carowinds at all?
671 points. A hell of a lot of people had to ride it.
I don't know, because I don't know how the points work. So if I ranked it as 1 out of 100, like, is that a lot of? I don't know. I don't know how it works. So
you get a top 10. So 67.1 people rank this number 1 is how that works, because you get 10 points
in
for
theory.
number 1. So not everybody wrote it number 1.
But I'm just saying, I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think this is the year. I think the other half of the people that didn't write Fury last year wrote it this year, and I think you're going to see a huge jump in Fury's numbers. At least, you got to say it's going to be at least number 2, right?
I agree.
Like, it's going to have to be at least 2.
I think Fury will be number 2, and I think it will be less than 100 points below Millennium Force, and I think that little smidge will be enough to say only 7 or 8 more voters have to go ride it after the voting period this year, and that's why I think, because I still think there's going to be a handful of people that haven't ridden it yet that will ride it before next year, and I think that handful of people is going to be enough. That's why I say if Fury is within 100 points of Millennium, I think it takes it over next year. I don't think Fury quite doubles is the problem. I
think it does.
This is a real tough call for me. Let me say this. I think Millennium Force wins. I think the awards being at Cedar Point might help Millennium a little bit too. I think Millennium still wins. I think Fury is absolutely number 2. I think it's a very close number 2. I would not be surprised at all if Fury wins. I would not be surprised one bit. If I'm putting money on it, it's just so hard to think that these people are not going to pick Millennium Force as number 1. It's become the right answer. That's the issue. It's just so hard to think that they won't do it.
Let me throw this out there to you too. There's a very real possibility that at the end of this evening, Cedar Point is standing there without a single golden ticket award in their hand.
Absolutely.
Because the best park is gone. Best new ride could easily go somewhere else, and very probably will.
Number 1 coaster too.
And Fury could be the best steel coaster. Cedar Point, which is by far the best amusement park in the world, the best ride set in the world, the best amusement park experience in the world, they could go through the golden tickets and not have a single damn award at the end of the evening.
And that would be the first. And that would be the first time ever. And
that will be the end of the Golden Tickets Awards. Honest to God. Because what the hell are we awarding here?
In the year that they host the awards.
Yeah.
In the year they host the awards, they have a very real possibility to not win a single award.
Yes.
Think about that.
And then I think every person voting needs to ask themselves, what the hell are we doing here if Cedar Point doesn't win a single award? Seriously. The self-reflection voters, that's what I want. What the hell are you doing here?
This is really, really tough. I have and again, that's another reason I go here. I have such a hard time believing that in the year they are hosting that they won't win Best Steel Coaster when they've won Best Steel Coaster almost every damn year. I think once the golden tickets move on from Cedar Point next year, I think that's when they say, okay, we'll admit Fury's better.
Or will the opposite happen in Cedar Point? Take Best Park again, Best New Ride, Best Steel Coaster, like they probably should. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. They probably should win all those awards. And
there was a lot of concern that Expedition G-Force would eventually take over once people went overseas, and we're seeing that that's not happening. It's not close enough. So I think Fury is the only realistic chance, because when is anyone going to build a steel coaster better than Fury? I don't know.
Well, 2020, Danny Miller. Come on. And it'll be at Cedar Point.
I said better, not taller.
Well, taller is better, Danny. I'm sorry. As much as you don't want to admit it.
Oh yes, tell that to the Storm Chaser fans.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Well, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Maverick is the best steel roller coaster in the world. Is better.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here this evening on CoasterNet Uncut. The golden tickets are scheduled for the beginning of September, so we'll find out if we're right then and see what happens. But it's been a fun discussion. So as always, I am Andy Rabarchak from Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
And as always, ride on, Ride Warriors.
See you next time, guys.